What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. Another Friday, another episode of Why Are We Bullish? Got an awesome lineup of guests this evening to get bullish together. Despite price action, we can ignore that. That's fine. But we've got plenty to chat about this evening. I hope you're all doing well. Of course, this is live. Anything can happen. So I defer to my friend Bill here.
We'll do it live.
Okay.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
If you have not already, please do like, sub, share, all those things. They help a ton getting this content in front of more eyeballs. I am Ben with the BTC Sessions. This is your daily session.
HODL the Bitcoin.
Before we bring in our guests, let's take a quick look at where we are in the market right now. I'm bringing up timechaincalendar.com. Simultaneously, I'll slap up the live chat over on the right-hand side of the screen. Everything you say from here on in will be live for the world to see, for better or worse. Timechaincalendar.com, we're sitting at $53,427 per coin. A single US dollar will snag you 1,872 sats. In terms of fees, low single digits, 3 sats per VByte next block. And in terms of Bitcoin mined, 19.75 million of them. That is 94.05% of the total supply. We're going to give a quick shout out to our sponsors and we'll be right in with our guests. So we'll see you in just a moment. Bitcoin Well is on a mission to enable independence by being one of the easiest and quickest ways to purchase Bitcoin in Canada and the US. And the best part about it, every buy goes directly into your own self-custody. They never hold your coins. You can add a Bitcoin address as part of onboarding. There's a transparent 1% spread, no hidden fees, no withdrawal fees. Plus they have KYC free sells and bill payments on their website. They're also a publicly traded company under the ticker BTCW on the TSXV. Check them out over at bitcoinwell.com. Check out my full tutorial on how to use them, and you can check out the links in the show notes down below and sign up today. CoinKite.com has some of the best hardware on the market today to secure your Bitcoin. The Cold Card Q is an absolute powerhouse and is my daily driver. And on top of this, they have plenty of other goodies, including the Mark IV, the Tap Signer, Open Dimes, the Block Clock, and much more. If you head over to their website, make sure you use code BTC Sessions at checkout to get a nice discount. Links are in the show notes down below. All right, we are back in and it's time to bring in our guests, at least 2/3 of them and perhaps all of them momentarily. But I do want to welcome to the stage Jimmy and Peter. It's good to see you guys. Thank you for joining me. And we will have a third guest. Hopefully, we'll cross our fingers for that. But nonetheless, we're going to dive right in. And before we do, we'll just do some quick intros for anybody watching that is unfamiliar. We'll do a quick round of who are you and what do you do? And Jimmy, I'll toss it to you first. Thanks for doing the show. And can you give yourself an intro?
Yeah, I'm Jimmy Song. I'm a programmer. I'm a teacher. I do lots of other stuff, but mostly I promote my books like this one. Fiat ruins everything. But yeah, I write books. I guess I'm a Bitcoin expert in some way. Although I suspect Peter has that same title, so I'm gonna leave that one for him. So I don't want to step on toes over here. So yeah, there you go.
Awesome. We're glad to have you here. And Peter, the Bitcoin expert, can you let people know who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, well, I'm Peter Todd. I'm not a real expert. I just go play one on TV. But sometimes I've done some work in Bitcoin Core. I'm responsible for the check hot time verify opcode way back when. And, I think professionally you could kind of say I tend to do a lot of analysis, like, recent example being like this L2 paper I was working on. Although frankly, this may not be the right show for me, because my job is to be bearish and fight all the problems.
That's okay. You've met Dave Bradley before, and he I think he's been on the show 3 or 4 times, and out of all of those times, it was only the last one where he was saying that he might become moderately bullish. He loves Bitcoin, but he's always cautiously optimistic or realistically pessimistic, whichever way you want to look at it. But either way,
can't blame him. He's Canadian,
Yeah.
After what's happened, I wouldn't blame him for not being bullish either.
Yeah, it's
so much oppression going on over there.
Yeah. Well, gents, we're gonna dive in now. I will say that we may be visited in a little bit by everybody's favorite uncle, hopefully, but we'll address that when and if it happens. Either way, we're gonna dive in. For anybody watching that's unfamiliar with the show, this is Why Are We Bullish? Simple premise to the show. Each one of us comes with a reason for being bullish, something we're currently excited about in and around Bitcoin. It can take any form. It can pertain to a news item, a current event, a personal experience, an app, a device, something happening with development. Doesn't matter what it is. Everybody gets to choose. But the flow of the show is pretty simple. Number one, somebody's going to drop their reason for being bullish. This is their chance to rant about whatever they're currently buzzing about. Number two, altogether, we're going to riff on that reason, comments, questions, rabbit holes, wherever we decide to go. And then finally, number three, we're going to rotate to the next person for their reason until we've all had a turn. So reason, riff, rotate, pretty simple. So we're going to get started. I'll kick us off today just to kind of get the ball rolling. And I have a reason for being bullish in and around actually a tutorial that I was working on this week. And so to preface this, the beginning of the year was a little rough when it came to Bitcoin privacy tools and the top-down pressures that came about in shutting down and arresting the Samurai founders, as well as and maybe I'll bring up this this article here, but this was when ZK Snacks discontinued their CoinJoin coordinator as of the 1st of June. They had previously said, hey, we're going to continue running it. And this was much earlier, and they were voluntarily doing some type of on-chain analysis to say yes or no to those that were trying to coin join, which is kind of when I started opting not to use that tool anymore. But in the end, they ended up just discontinuing the coordinator anyways. So we saw a lot of stuff that wasn't super promising in and around Bitcoin privacy tools. And so some because of these top-down pressures, and the reason that I'm bullish is I think that maybe not fully yet, but I think we're starting to move from the Napster stage of Bitcoin privacy tools to more of the BitTorrent stage of Bitcoin privacy tools. And what I mean by that is not quite as easy to clamp down upon. And so I ended up doing a video and I dropped it this morning, but I kind of worked on it throughout the week about using Wasabi Wallet with different coordinators. And again, it's still early stages, but you're starting to see various coordinators pop up, some of them with zero fees. And they are, and once again, enabling people to use CoinJoin with Wasabi. And there's even a Liquidity Noster account, which catalogs kind of the liquidity of some of these CoinJoin coordinators. And so right now it's very much skewed towards one particular coordinator. So this one here, in the past 24 hours, it's had 20 Bitcoin join in new for CoinJoin rounds, and it is currently remixing around 401 Bitcoin over the course of that period of time. Now, when you go down the next one down the list, again, this totaling around 35 Bitcoin, and then it goes down to single digits from there. So it's heavy skewed towards one. But the reason that I'm happy to see this stuff start to pop up is, yes, you could play whack-a-mole and take out the top coordinator, but a lot of that liquidity will then move to another option, much like, Pirate Bay getting shut down and Pirate Bay 2 pops up like a few days later kind of thing. And so while it's early days for some of these coordinators, and I recognize there's a lot of nuance here, just the mere fact that options are popping up and tools are popping up makes me happy. And a secondary one, again, utilizing Nostr in a different way. Again, the Liquisabi and the ability to find coordinators over on Nostr is kind of due to the fact that it's hard to censor or take down posts. But Joinster looks very interesting in that it's using Nostr relays to actually coordinate the CoinJoin rounds. I'm yet to play with this. There is an Electrum plugin that's available right now. It seems we'll say we can cautiously, optimistically say eventually it'll be on Google Play, but that's obviously easily prevented or taken off the App Store. But nonetheless, I'm happy to see this move towards thinking at least a little bit more adversarially and building out some of these tools so that at the very least it will just be an ongoing game of whack-a-mole rather than pointing a finger at a singular registered company and then arresting its founders. So that's where I'm at with my bullishness. It's cautious bullishness, but I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts in and around the state of Bitcoin privacy, where the tools are at, anything that you've seen positive and or negative around that. So whoever wants to dive in.
Well, I think the irony of what you said there, I mean, you went and talked about, the Pirate Bay and how you could get the Pirate Bay 2 and all this. But in that world, the Pirate Bay continually doesn't die. And it's quite funny how, in the world of torrents, a lot of people actually complain about the Pirate Bay because it's this big centralized thing that doesn't seem to go away, doesn't seem to get replaced by other stuff, doesn't get replaced by any, alternatives or decentralized alternatives or anything like that. And, it's the kind of thing where it almost looks like a fed-off in some ways, except it does work. So, like, it's a funny example to go bring up because it kind of makes your points, but I don't think in the way you expected. And Wasabi could end up being the same thing. I mean, you could easily have a coordinator who just says fuck it and refuses to kowtow to pressure. And the nature of the internet means that unless entities are strongly censoring the internet, if there's some country which just doesn't care and allows a coordinator to be hosted, that could just go on indefinitely.
Yeah.
And currently there is one major coordinator that seems to be running in the sort of Wasabi world, and it's kind of gotten all the traffic. Mm-hmm. And, how long will that go on? I have no idea.
Oh, well, we'll cross our fingers, right? And hopefully it's not the feds. I did want to quickly, before I get Jimmy's thoughts here, I did want to quickly show again kind of the ease of swapping a coordinator, just for anybody who's unfamiliar. Before, this is Wasabi, and pretty much how it would happen before is you just download it. Everything would just kind of start up in the background. It would link to their coordinator, and you deposit and would automatically coin join. But since they sunset their coordinator, it's pretty much just a quick setting to change. And it even does ask you off the top of the setup if you want to add a coordinator. But more or less, like here on the Liquisabi account here, based on liquidity, you can just click over to the website of the coordinator you want to use. There's a little box with this URL, and I can just copy it. And then in CoinJoin or in Wasabi, you just go to coordinator and you just paste it in right here. And then you hit done and you restart the wallet. And then you're pretty much good to go. You can also, as I've done, you can connect to your own node. So I've got this connected to my own Start9. You can, obviously connect your hardware and coin join directly into cold storage. But the switching of the coordinator is not a difficult task. And I'm glad that they incorporated it into the initial setup of the wallet. So maybe that also helps with.
It actually got to point out something that just happened today, and I'll preface this by saying I don't quite understand the full technical details, exactly the nuance here, but I think what I'm about to say is basically correct, which is basically for blockchain information, Wasabi was running a central server that would provide block data and so on and so forth. And that central server has gone down due to lack of funding. And as far as I can tell, having your own node to connect to is really critical there because it can use your own node in lieu of that central server. And basically, I believe, I could be wrong on this, but I believe the current status is it will work just fine without it. Like I say, I haven't actually, this just happened today. I haven't had time to go test it myself for sure. But, this is how I've always run Wasabi with my own nodes sitting on the same virtual machine that I run Wasabi in.
Yeah. It's again, funny enough, I posted this and right after that news hit, and there was a couple of people commenting, "Oh, their back end is down today." Of course, the timing of it, but I actually didn't notice because I was connected to my node. At least as far as I understand, everything seems to be working just fine. So, yeah, there you go. Run a node. Jimmy, I'm curious to get some of your thoughts in around this.
Yeah, it's funny because what you saw as the part that sort of made you hesitant about Bitcoin privacy, which was a lot of these centralized services being taken down and the federal governments of various countries attacking them. I see that as like the bullish part because that's how you weed out all of the single points of failure, and that's how you make the system more robust. Once you take down the parts that are easy to take down, then you get solutions that are way more robust and sort of resilient to these attacks. So every time you get attacked, at least in any decentralized system, you get better solutions, and the things that survive tend to be the ones that are immune to the things that the other things that didn't survive. It's kind of like a continual evolution. So I see those attacks as a good thing, at least for the long-term viability of Bitcoin privacy. And honestly, to a large degree, I don't think we've been attacked enough to have a truly robust solution that's actually decentralized, that is very robust, that is very good for the user, and has all of the properties that I think we all eventually want. We need some people to kind of try things, and then those don't work, and then you iterate, and it's sort of this like market back and forth. And I gave a talk a while ago on how Bitcoin is anti-fragile and how every time it gets attacked, it grows and strengthens. And I see privacy as definitely one of those areas where we could actually stand to be attacked a little bit more. So we know where our vulnerabilities are, because every time you get exposed on a vulnerability, you get innovation and people like not covering just that vulnerability, but all kinds of other vulnerabilities. So, we have different solutions that are trying to be more decentralized, using Nostr to do the coordination and things like that. Those are very good innovations. If we had to rely on a single domain to make it work, you could just go to a DNS and just like shut it off or whatever. It makes it very vulnerable. So I see that as the bullish thing is getting attacked, so that we can patch all of these things before we get the flood of people in the next few cycles or whatever.
Yeah, I guess go ahead.
I just want to say, I got to jump in on one note there, was that, Nostr is not decentralized. I mean, the way that these kind of coin join ideas over Nostr work is simply that you go pick some Nostr relays, and then you just go and relay the data. It's really no different than Wasabi Coordinator, than changing a few details of the protocol under the hood. And, when you compare that to a Nostr coordinator, a Wasabi Coordinator, the Wasabi Coordinator has a lot of advantages, though, because you can do things that a pure Nostr protocol can't. It can do things, protect you from attackers that are, for instance, trying to go pretend to do coin joins, to go and, be your only coin join partners. So, ironically, I would actually go say the Wasabi thing is the thing that excites me more out of those two. And I also make the point that there's a very big difference between centralization of protocol like Wasabi and centralization of protocol like Bitcoin. Because when Wasabi fails, it's, other than, of course, a potential privacy failure, any other type of failure is just an inconvenience. It means you can't use it briefly. But your coins are still there. Your coins are always under your control. Versus when something like Bitcoin fails, and hypothetically, if Bitcoin was a central server, obviously, if that central server failed, everyone would lose their money. It's a very different set of trade-offs between a coin join protocol and like something like an eCash.
So, what my question then would be is, given that you're bullish on the Wasabi thing versus the Nostra thing, wouldn't that in and of itself being attacked also be that hardening of? So you're saying like, oh well, there's going to be people that are doing fake coin joins. There's going to be some types of attack that Wasabi may have been able to prevent are now attack vectors. Do you think that over time that further hardens the ecosystem though, and forces us to grapple with each one of these issues and create even more robust options?
Unfortunately, that type of attack doesn't, because it's a privacy attack. It's very hard to go and realize that you're actually being attacked. Whereas the attack of just taking down a central server, it's happened because it no longer works. And between those two, this is why I'm much more bullish on Wasabi, which accepts that it has this central server issue. Of course, you can change the server, but at least in the near term, it's an inconvenience. Versus something like a coin join over Nostra, which is still just as centralized, but then because it doesn't take advantage of the centralization, is much weaker in other ways.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Jimmy? Do you have any qualms with what was said?
I don't do that many coin joins, so I can't speak to the specifics. But
you don't admit to doing that many.
Yeah,
you don't admit to do it.
Well, I'm going to have to say that I can't reveal whether I do coin joins or not. But regardless, the point is that there's more things being tried, and the market's very good at finding what works. And that's the beauty of the whole iterative evolution of all of these things, is that once they're found to be vulnerable, or if there's an obvious attack vector, those things kind of get patched through either the same protocol hardened or a different protocol altogether.
I've got to also imagine that
if you can convince the public that the protocol's vulnerable, I think like Samurai showed, that's a hard thing to do. And the alternative to Wasabi isn't like Nostro, coin joins. It's something like Join Market, which is designed from the ground up to be decentralized and does a very good job of it. And has different pluses and minuses than Wasabi, but both are good protocols that do well with the constraints of what they're trying to do.
Yeah. In the coordinator realm, I've got to believe that over time, if some of these coordinators continue to work, that regardless of top-down pressures, that there'll be a gradual kind of, reputation that some of these get over time. And I anticipate the same with things like feta mints and cashew mints and things like that, where yes, obviously, whether you like the idea of mints at all or not, I imagine like right now it's just kind of it's a crapshoot whether or not you get a good one. And the same could be true of some of these coordinators. But if they've been around for an extended period of time, then some of them will gain a degree of trust, and again, operative word being trust, over time, and become a little bit more reliable to use. I don't know.
Well, this is why having protocols that give you mathematical guarantees is so important, though. Consider Wasabi doesn't work this way, but consider a coin join protocol where the coordinator did know all of the inputs and outputs. in that kind of environment, it might be that the quote unquote most trustworthy, longest running, biggest volume, apparently, coin joins were actually the ones run by chain houses, because they'd have the budgets go and do all this work to go de-anonymize you. I mean, you got to be careful with this stuff. I mean, this is precisely why Wasabi created a very clever, very difficult to implement, very mathematical protocol to go and make sure that even they don't know the linkage between inputs and outputs. And that's so important to do things like that.
Fair enough. Well, I mean, all we can do is, I guess, see how all this plays out over time. I'm, again, optimistic. I'm happy to see things kind of working thus far, despite, I guess, the back end going down for Wasabi today. It's still chugging away with my node, and yeah, it's interesting to revisit Wasabi. It's the first time I've played with it since the old version, like the 1.0 version. So either way, I encourage people to at least learn about this stuff and start kind of, maybe don't toss much in it, but learn a little bit about how it works. Jam is great if you're running that on like a Start 9 or an Umbrel or something like that. That's another cool one to play with. And I have yet to. I haven't used Joinster, so I have yet to form an opinion on that one, but we shall see. So either way, I'll put a bow on that topic. And thanks for indulging me in that one. But we're going to do a rotation here. And Jimmy, I'm going to toss it to you now. And I'm going to cue you up with the same question everybody gets. Why are you bullish?
Well, I'm bullish in the long term for a whole host of reasons, mostly around Bitcoin being the hardest money in existence and all that. But I'm more bullish in the short term because of the Fed rate cut that's coming in the next few weeks. And I think that's an obvious political reality, and I don't want to put too much on the Fed, like lowering it by a quarter or a half point or something. But it is sort of like a signal, because they haven't lowered rates in a very long time, and that they're basically crying uncle at this point, because they realize there's too many things kind of that they're having to balance with unemployment and inflation and things like that. And there's obviously an election here, and they want things to be good in November. So there's a lot of political pressure. I don't think this will be the end of the cuts. They're almost always sort of like moving one way or the other. But it does mean that, as they move and sort of like destroy the fiat system from inside itself, you'll get more loose monetary policy. You'll get more money flooding in. Though we'll see. Like it's entirely possible they'll cut rates and the market goes down or something because they anticipated even bigger cuts. So, but the fact that they're crying uncle tells me that something broke, and probably several things broke, and the breakdown of the fiat system is something that I've been waiting for, and that's what makes me bullish.
We're actually on our third. We just had our third rate cut here in Canada this year so far. We're backpedaling quickly, I suppose. But yeah, it's the rest of the world seems to kind of hinge and really react to what the U.S. does. It has obviously has an overweighted impact on everybody else. Interesting that, again, I find that Bitcoin will have like a very sharp reaction to something initially, like you'll see spikes or drops, and it's people rolling the dice on certain news items, but then it's kind of like a gradual catch up afterwards to the new economic reality. I feel like, again, people will, based on whether or not there's a rate cut or how large the rate cut is, there'll be an initial price movement, and then it'll just kind of go back to where it was and then slowly work its way up into the right over time. But yeah, I don't know. Like, Peter, do you have any feelings either way in and around the Fed rate cuts, fiat implosion?
I mean, see, that was kind of a funny topic because depending on your perspective, I would say I'm either bullish or bearish on that. And I think I would say I'm bearish on Bitcoin's price going up because of this kind of general like economic action. But simultaneously, that's because I'm very bullish about where politics is going. You know, I go look at, as an example, you know, the new president of Argentina, who seems to have turned the economy around by just straight common sense policies. And, you know, he is certainly being looked at by so many other politicians who see it. Hang on a second, you know, I could go pull off the same thing here and maybe, you know, win an election or not lose an election. And I'm not going to say it's going to happen in every country, but, you know, you look at Canada, for instance, how a much more saner politician is, you know, is the one who's projected to go win. And if an election gets called, and it may be that an election gets called much sooner than otherwise, you know, due to internal Canadian politics. I won't get into all that, but, you know, in that perspective, I think what Bitcoiners might find is that a lot of the course corrections, fixing the problems of the current economic system, happen faster than they expect it to before Bitcoin actually, you know, gets the traction that they really want. You know, like it or not, like a well-run fiat currency, yeah, it's not going to last forever, but they do pretty well in the short term, and the short term can be a lot longer than you wanted to go hold your Bitcoin for.
I wonder how, again, because the actions that politicians and central bankers take, obviously there's a lag to those having any real effect. Obviously, like, you know, something moves and certainly there's an initial reaction, but it's again like, you know, we print a bunch of money and obviously there's no inflation like right out the gate, and so we just go on our merry way until a year and a half later, oh my god, we've got,
well, it could be a lot faster than that. I mean, you know, you print the money and get it into the hands of a lot of people. Inflation happens pretty quick. You know, we saw that with COVID when they just basically helicoptered in money to everyone.
Yeah, I guess it depends what numbers you're looking at too. Like, are you looking at the official numbers, or are you looking at your grocery bill? Yeah, I mean, but I mean, even with, and Canada had a hell of a lot more stimmies going around than the US. What was, Jimmy, what did they send out in terms of stimmy checks in the US, like over the
I think $600 initially. It was like $1,200 if you're a married couple, and then they had one with, like, depending on the number of children, so I got a lot for that, obviously, but yeah, there were various things, but the biggest one was the PPP loans, which you didn't have to pay back.
Yeah.
And like, there was so much fraud in that, and pretty much every institution in the US that had more than, I don't know, even like 20 employees or something took money, and it was just a flood of money that came in. And the M2 I kind of showed it, right? Like it went from 15 trillion to 22 trillion in like 2 years.
Yeah.
And notably, the way the PPP loans were set up is that you could create new institutions, go and collect them. You know, there were ways to do that. Suddenly, the creation of new businesses suddenly goes through the roof because people are fraudulently creating businesses to fraudulently collect these loans.
That's true. And I mean, in Canada, we had, it was if you couldn't go to work, which you were deemed that you were unable to go to work because it was
you were non-essential or essential or something like that.
Yeah, if you're a non-essential and you couldn't work and you couldn't work remotely, the government, like, you were getting, I think, $2,000 a month. You could just get checks from the government.
Yep.
It was.
Oh yeah, that was the other one, the 99 weeks of unemployment that you got. Like
Yeah.
that was pretty huge in the US as well.
And I mean, most people, like there were people that claimed that and used other excuses to get checks that they'll never be able to pay it back. And the government has tried to collect and probably has collected on some of it. But I mean, I personally know people that got money in a way that
Well,
they shouldn't have, and they're like they have no financial means to even try to pay it back.
and to be clear, I mean, if you did qualify for it, you did not pay it back. You know, this was free. This was free money.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, the nature of like how they qualified really made it relatively free money. Like, you know, a good example is if you had a job that on average was kind of inconsistent, you could consistently collect this on the basis that you're unemployed, even though in any real circumstance you might have been unemployed half the time anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder again, because when we were seeing the numbers, in terms of inflation in the US versus Canada, it wasn't too far apart again. And these are official numbers, but I feel like we went a little bit crazier than the US, but maybe that's not the case because like the business loans and stuff like that, maybe we didn't.
No. It was the case. Especially on a per capita basis, I think you had way more money printed. Well, I mean, you had about the same amount printed, but the thing is, U.S. is the world reserve currency, and there's always there's a bigger market for it. So essentially, the U.S. can export inflation to places like Canada. Usually, it goes further down the line to like the poor suckers in Nigeria and Turkey, and of course they suffered just as way worse than Canadians did. But Canada isn't the U.S., so it suffered a little more. And I would say people in Japan and all those places suffered around the same amount as maybe Canada did. But but the U.S. always suffers the least because they're the world reserve currency.
It's definitely particularly pronounced nowadays. The grocery store, like I've heard of people coming across into Ontario from driving up from the U.S. to visit family and going to the grocery store and going, oh my God, what happened here? And I mean, even like Niagara Falls, straddling the border there, more or less the same house on either side of the border. It's like the difference in pricing in the housing market is absolutely ridiculous when you look at the cost. Again, adjusted for the US dollars, it's unbelievable.
Well, I mean, that tells you that there was probably a lot of the money going into real estate and long-term assets rather than into groceries. But even the groceries there, like I was in Toronto a few weeks ago.
I got to make an important point here, though. So when you go, one issue with real estate was that COVID made tons of people move. So real estate, on top of just general inflation, also had this bizarre thing where suddenly everyone's preferences changed, and tons of people moved around to get out of the cities. And I suspect, and also because people were spending more time at home, their general willingness to spend money on property and where they live went up. So you get this whole double whammy effect that isn't true of other things.
It was interesting here, so I'm in Calgary, and Vancouver and Toronto real estate markets. I mean, they've always been stupid, but they're particularly insane over the past few years. And what we noticed here was our real estate market initially wasn't as insane. And when I say that, again, I'm in a newer home as of 2020, and it's still ridiculous. But over the course, as Vancouver and Toronto got worse and worse to the point where it's just more or less unlivable in terms of being able to actually purchase anything if you're Gen Z, if you're a young person, you're just not ever going to own a home there, let alone anywhere else. But we saw an influx of people from Toronto and Vancouver say, I can't afford these cities, and then flood into Calgary as an alternative. And thus our real estate market, as they started coming down in the other cities, started going up in ours. And so my home, since 2020, in Canadian dollar terms, is 75% more. Like in 3 years, three and a half years.
Well, I mean, but that's everywhere around the world, like literally everywhere. Like, like you go almost any major city or a suburb around there, you're going to see similar price hikes. That's the money going to where it's going to get preserved, right? Like you don't want to go into an asset that's depreciating as quickly as the fiat currency that you have. So doesn't surprise me. But I mean, the weird thing about Canada is they have like weird zoning, and building new places apparently is incredibly difficult. And
the licensing in Vancouver is some, I think it's like 50% of the cost of the home, or something, like some high double digit.
A lot of rent seeking that you're funding with these home prices. But that seems to be the case.
Well, and I mean, Canada, Canadian population is exploding right now. Not because Canadians are having more sex, because they're importing a lot more quote unquote Canadians. So that's on top of all this stuff.
The birth rate in Canada is plummeting.
It's ferociously low. It's very low. Not the lowest in the world. There are places that are worse, but
Korea's way worse. Korea's way worse.
People.
I mean, you can't blame people for not wanting to have kids if they can barely afford to support themselves. Like, it's just this nihilistic.
I mean, thing is, like, in the past, people would go have kids when they could barely afford it. Something has changed in culture. People used to have kids when, like, you have 8 of them and 2 of them die of starvation, and that's considered good. That's considered to be pretty damn successful. Like, the culture has changed.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but that used to be when, people, like 80% of the population were farmers. And for any sort of farming activity, you need a lot of labor. And having kids was a way to be more productive with the land that you had. So that was a large part of it.
I think that's very trite, though. Like, that may be part of how this culturally evolved. But in terms of what people actually believe, I don't think you can really, like, pin it down so easily. And, one example is you look at the baby boom, in the West following World War II. Something happened with the psychology that said, all right, we're going to go have a bunch of kids. We're going to all get married. That wasn't because of a sudden increase in farming. That was something else going on.
Yeah, that was something else. I probably due to sort of like that experience of war and like just seeing that things were, things could end at any minute. That sort of like wanting
or the alternative. Shit, we just won, and we have Christian values, and now we have all this wealth because all this war manufacturing suddenly turned into something else. I mean, it's. I don't think there's an obvious conclusion there.
I think optimistic people are more inclined.
Yeah, if you have hope, you definitely are more inclined to have kids.
Under some cultures.
Yeah, and I would also argue there's something to be said about the directionality of I guess your living circumstances. Like a lot of people right now are growing up where their parents had materially more than them, and so they were used to a certain living standard, and they see that being diminished over time. And so then that, I think, probably plays into the psychology of like, if it's gotten worse for me and I can afford less than what I was used to as a kid with my parents, then what are my kids, if I had kids? First of all, how am I going to be able to afford them to my previous understanding of what the living standard I should be at, or perceived? And then what are they going to have to deal with when they're born? So I think that the directionality of quality of life plays into it, because obviously, like, somebody who's not doing so hot by today's standards is living like a king, compared to 200 years ago. And people would
you mean the water comes out of a tap? What?
Yeah, true. You can heat and or cool your home. Oh my god.
Yeah.
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 You don't have to go outside to poop.
Yeah. Just gets taken away.
The food just disappears.
Yeah. There we go. There's a clip where we're bullish on poo being taken away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, I think in a general sense, there's always reason to be bullish in and around the fiat cogs continuing to turn and gradually ruin themselves. So yeah, I agree. There's a lot of can kicking that can still be done, but yeah, I mean, as with everything fiat related, this too eventually will be good for Bitcoin. So with that, I'll put a little, I guess, bow on this topic, and we're going to do one final rotation. Before I do, though, I got to give one last shout out to show sponsor. So, Peter, we're going to jump to you as soon as we get back. And when we actually do come back, I am going to also give away some sats. So people that have their Lightning wallets ready, make sure that you're good to go with your LN URL capable Lightning wallet. So we'll see you guys in a sec, and we'll be right back. Speed Wallet is a Bitcoin Lightning wallet built with simplicity in mind. Spend and receive with ease, claim your own Lightning address, shop your favorite gift cards, and even earn rewards when you spend. Head over to speed.app to download the app on your mobile or desktop today, and use the link down below to get 5,000 sats for free and have the chance to win even more. Keeper is a mobile Bitcoin application for managing and securing your funds for the long term. You can set up hot wallets for day-to-day spending or create digital vaults for deep cold storage. They also offer assisted multisig options as well as inheritance planning. And on top of that, Keeper boasts a long list of support for Bitcoin hardware, longer than I've seen for any other mobile application. You can check them out today by searching Bitcoin Keeper in your app store or heading to bitcoinkeeper.app. When it comes to peer-to-peer trading and lending, instant self-custody, and no KYC, HODLHODL is the place to be. You can sign up with just an email address, and once you're there, you can start browsing offers immediately, whether you're looking to buy and sell, or whether you're looking to lend or borrow. You can check them out today at the links down below. All right, we're back in, and we're going to give away some quick sats before we dive into Peter's reason for being bullish. So I'll just pull it up really quick here. Bitcoin Well dashboard, we're going to use some of our accumulated points to toss a coin in the Bitcoin wishing well, where you can win somewhere between 500 and potentially a million sats. So I'm going to toss that in. I'm going to enlarge a little bit so it's scannable, and 500 sats. Whoever scans it first, one person can snag them away. If you do snag the sats, be sure to let us know either in the chat or hit me up on Nostr or X or wherever you're watching this in the comments on YouTube and let me know. And so with that, gents, we're going to dive into the final topic here. Peter, I'm going to cue you up with the same question. Why are you bullish?
Well, as some of you may know, I did recently put out this big, 35, 40-page paper on covenant-dependent L2 systems. And, what I mean by that is, well, first of all, when I talk about L2, I'm talking about systems such as Lightning that allow you to go trade Bitcoin. We're talking about Bitcoin-denominated L2 systems, after all. And they have one of two properties. Either no one can basically economically perform fraud against them, or with a much more preferred option, you can always withdraw your coins on chain. And, just putting it out there, that's kind of the definition we're talking about. That's why Lightning applies to something like, say, Liquid or eCash doesn't, because it's centralized. Now, what's interesting about this is there's a lot of things that are more scalable than Lightning that are coming out. And the issue with Lightning, of course, is that a Lightning channel needs one UTXO per channel. And if you want to go and scale Lightning to like the entire world, you need everyone who wants to be fully custodial, fully self-custodial with their Lightning wallets to have a UTXO. And where the covenant-dependent L2 system comes in is basically clever ways of having multiple users share one UTXO. So there's just less on-chain footprint. And I will say, after writing that paper, I'm bullish for two interesting reasons. And the first one is that Lightning is actually pretty damn good. A really interesting stat I dug up researching the paper was that in the entire world, there's only roughly 4 billion people with a smartphone. And it's not unlikely that that number actually goes down, given that overall birth rates are going down. The developed, or at least somewhat developed world where people can afford a smartphone, that's probably going to go shrink in the future rather than increase. Smartphone penetration, there's a limit to how many people can have a smartphone in the world. And, that's kind of the barrier to being self-custodial. You got to have a computer. And for the average person, the phone is a computer. So long story short is, when you work this out, it's likely that the existing Lightning protocol with no really fundamental changes can support something like hundreds of millions of users. That's a significant chunk of like 4 billion people. So, we may find that we actually scale Lightning up to basically everyone who wants to go hold Bitcoin, without that much difficulty. And then secondly, in the review I did of L2 stuff, it looks like there's some protocols that are reasonable. In particular, ARC seems to be, a protocol that's, it doesn't have the same properties as Lightning. It doesn't have the same properties as eCash. It has properties that can make sense in certain cases. And us getting to a point where you can run ARC on Bitcoin, you enable check template verify, we're probably basically there. It's not that much of a stretch. As it is, you can actually run a modified version of ARC where, the people using it go and sign off at every transaction. And that you can run on mainnet Bitcoin right now. People are actually writing this. So I guess you could say, there's my bullishness. It's bullish on tech, because we seem to have done a pretty good job of coming up with new tech yet again to go and push Bitcoin scaling further. And, if you read my article, of course, me being a professional bear, I've got lots of caveats there. But, the general tendency, I think, is good. In much the same way, if you asked the same question like 10 years ago, I probably would have said, well, there's a bunch of caveats to this L2 concept, but we'll probably get there. And sure enough, we did.
Now, I've got a question then. In and around, obviously there's been some drama in and around trying to introduce some of these things that enable covenants.
Oh boy, has there been drama?
Yeah. So I'm curious, I guess from both of you, because this is a bit of a blind spot for me. So I'm curious to hear the takes on first of all, like just a general gist of where's the drama coming from, and then I guess kind of laying out the case on either side, what people are seeing, why they do or don't want things like CTV or some of the other proposals out there.
There's been a lot of different proposals, and that's part of the problem. It's sort of a fragmented landscape, because there's literally like 5 or 6 different viable opcode changes that would enable covenants. Some of them require you to like pre-sign a bunch of stuff, others not. There's a lot of different sort of like pieces, and some of them work together to enable certain other things and stuff like that. So it's part of it is that fragmentation. There's no one covenants proposal that everyone is behind. It also didn't help that Jeremy was pushing just so hard for OpsCTV for like a few years, almost to the, like, he kind of turned off a lot of the people that were like kind of, watching and saying, hey, like, okay, this might be reasonable, but he was just so much like, we need to get this in now. What do I need to do? He almost kind of treated it almost like kind of like a fiat hierarchy, almost like whose permission do I need to get this thing in? And that's not how consensus works, right? Like you don't go get permission from the CEO of Bitcoin and then get this feature in. But that's kind of almost how he approached it. I mean, he built demos, he did workshops, he did all kinds of stuff, which I think were good. But like in a sense, like the entire covenants thing is, there's a lot of cool things that you can do, and I get that as an engineer, it's very exciting because now you can open a Lightning channel with somebody that without them being online or something like that. Like that sounds cool, right? But here's the thing about like making changes within Bitcoin is you know what you're at least some of the exciting things that you're able to do, but you don't necessarily know all of the drawbacks, and you're not entirely clear on like how this will come about, or whether some of these exciting use cases are actually going to make a difference, right? And this is the thing about like enabling some of this stuff. If it turns out to be a dud, then it's like you put all that work in for nothing, and you've used a lot of the social capital maybe, or the momentum that you might be able to get for some sort of a soft fork, and you've sort of dissipated it on a complete dud. And that, I mean, not to say that would happen, but that's that's a non-zero possibility, and that's something that you have to account for. So, that's sort of like the tension is, like things work pretty good right now, and I think Peter just made the case that Lightning, just as it is, without anything else, it's entirely possible that it can serve the needs of the entire world already. And by the way, Peter, I did not expect you to be bullish on the fact that we're reducing in population, right? Like that's not a reason to be bullish that I expected. But
it's bullish for one thing. It's not bullish for another thing. Much the same way as that I was bearish and bullish simultaneously with inflation.
But that's kind of the idea is that like do we actually need it, or are we just sort of indulging engineers' sort of like desire to go build something that they want to build rather than what the entire Bitcoin community wants? And that's the real tension here, is that there is sort of like this desire to move forward and do cooler things just from an engineering perspective. And I mean, maybe there are real use cases that would get heavily utilized, but we don't really know that, versus like a lot of users that are like, oh, do we really need this? Bitcoin kind of already works pretty well for my needs. And like there, like as much as we talk about covenants, is there any company that's like going and providing sort of like versions of the covenant functionality that's making money off of it? Like I don't necessarily see strong market demand for these things, other than like engineers wanting to play with it and do these cool things and things like that. And engineers aren't necessarily very good at reading the market and saying, okay, like this is what the actual market actually needs or not.
Well, I think like CTV is a very interesting example of that problem, because it would have been 2-3 years ago maybe, when the CTV was first kind of getting proposed and there was first this flurry of activity. And I remember I wrote on the Bitcoin Dev mailing list response to this proposed CTV BIP, going through and saying, hey, you just have not made your case. Like, you list these use cases, but the use cases aren't very good, and you haven't really fleshed them out to the point where we can actually say, yes, this is the correct thing to do. And I think what kind of saved Jeremy's CTV is that other use cases were developed by other people, stuff that I don't think he had really fully conceived of. But certainly at the time, I mean, you just don't go and waste all that effort and put all that risk into enabling something when you just haven't made the case. Now, by contrast, of course, I've got my own soft fork implemented, checkbox on verify. With checkbox on verify, I think, first of all, of course, the Bitcoin market cap was far smaller when checkbox on verify was being debated and discussed. So certainly the consequences are just less. There's a lot less money on the table when Bitcoin's, $10 or whatever it was, and when Bitcoin's, $50,000. But the other thing is that one thing that checkbox on verify clearly enabled was payment channels. Everyone could see this would be useful, and it's like we all knew this would be something that would get used, and the way it did it was just so simple that, and in fairness, CTV is quite simple too. But I think between those two factors, well, really three factors, it was much easier to get it in. Whereas Jeremy didn't make that case, and then on top of this, then burned bridges, doing silly stunts like saying, "Well, we're going to do a UASF for CTV." It's just not good politics. It makes people pissed off, and I guess to the credit of the Bitcoin community, I think the tech people are reasonable enough. It's not like, now we've just said, oh yeah, CTV was terrible, we're never going to look at it again. But if CTV gets implemented, the reason will not be Jeremy, it'll be the fact that the idea was good.
If I'm not mistaken, Jimmy, we had I emceed a panel on soft forks with you, Jeremy, and Paul Stork in Miami a couple of years. That was it's funny enough, it wasn't too antagonistic amongst the three.
Well, I kind of understood both their positions, right? In the sense that they had been Paul for like 7 years and Jeremy for like 2 years at that point had been trying to get people excited about their soft fork. But like the consensus kept changing on them, so like they couldn't do it, right? I mean, at least that was the.
I wouldn't. Well, so with Jeremy, I think the consensus is changing on CTV. With drive chains, I think the consensus among reasonable tech people is always being it's a terrible idea. It'll always be a terrible idea. If it ever gets implemented, we're screwed.
Oh yeah, but what I could sense from both of them was that they were both extremely frustrated with the process, and the point I made during that panel was, okay, like you're never going to have like some fixed process to go get consensus. That's not how consensus works, and the consensus is always changing because there's always new people coming into Bitcoin and new users, and like Peter pointed out, the market cap is growing, and like Bitcoin at $10 is very different than Bitcoin at $53,000, and those are very you have different trade-offs and risks that you have to think about, and you're not necessarily going to be able to convince them, and I sense that frustration, and I can't blame them for the frustration, but at the same time, like this is kind of what you have to do if you want to get something in, is you really have to make a really good case before everybody, and you have to convince them, hey, like this is the right thing to do. And to Peter's point, I think Paul's done way worse a job of that than Jeremy. Jeremy's more or less shut up, which honestly has probably been the best thing for OpsCTV, because it's sort of shown like, okay, yeah, there are like kind of cool things that you can do, and other people are sort of making the case for him, which I think is more effective than him advocating for himself. Paul, on the other hand, is like talking about a hard fork or something, and like launching his own coin, or it's like way
very weirdly influenced soft fork last I heard.
Yeah, but it's getting like further and further off the rails, because like this is kind of his baby or something, and that's a sense I get with stuff like that. And I honestly I don't expect either of those to get implemented anytime soon. I mean, I guess Paul could through some sort of soft fork that's minority or something like that, but I don't expect either of them to really get traction anytime soon. In part because of sort of how long it's gone on and how I don't see the traction there for consensus. I mean, like with something like OpsCLTV, it was pretty obvious that it had it had at least convinced all the technical folks, hey, this could be very useful. And there was functionality that it would enable that we needed for certain things that we all wanted to do. But with OPSI TV or drive chains or something like that, I don't see that level. And again, the community's bigger. There are more people depending on Bitcoin and so on. So I think it's probably an order of magnitude harder or more than it was, say, like 6, 7, 8 years ago. And that it's only going to get harder from here as Bitcoin gets like more higher in price with more use cases and more people depending on it.
Peter, do you?
I kind of disagree with you on this though, where the difference between CTV and drive chains is not the person behind it. That is not the big difference. The big difference is one of them is a reasonable idea and the other one is a terrible idea. If I decided to spend 10 years of my life trying to push for off drive chain, I couldn't do it because there is no way to convince other people that's a good idea. It's just fundamentally a bad idea. Like, maybe I could go do it with like really nasty political games and like try to force the issue, but there's no way I could do this through consensus. It's just a bad idea. That's just how it is. Whereas CTV, I think there's a way to screw up the politics and piss people off, but because it's fundamentally a good idea, potentially, and I'm increasingly leaning to it is actually a reasonably good idea. There is a way to go convince people, regardless of what political mistakes you've made. You just need to go get other people to say, "Hey, I actually need this thing for this," and it kind of builds on that. And I'll make an analogy even to my own like checkbox on verify. No matter how hard I tried, like if I had hypothetically back in 2014 said, "You know what? I see that checkbox on verify is a good idea. I am going to poison the well. I will make sure it never gets implemented." I would have actually failed at that because it's such a thing that Bitcoin needs that someone would have come off and said, "Yeah, that Peter guy was crazy, but let's do this anyway."
So, Peter, how do you see this playing out in terms of CTV or some of these other proposals? Do you think that, I mean, you must think that there's a reasonable possibility that something gets implemented over time, but
Oh yeah, no, I definitely do. And I think the most likely path at the moment that I could easily foresee is someone makes a good case for ARC, and then through ARC, they go and make the case indirectly for CTV. And basically, the reason why like CTV fits this really well is it's just fundamentally about saying that I want to commit in advance to how this UTXO is split up. And you can already do this with signatures. The signatures have this very fundamental drawback that other things can be signed. Like this is actually kind of reminiscent to my own checkbox on verify, where prior to the checkbox on verify opcode, you absolutely could make a covenantish like thing where you said these coins can be spent in the future. But because it wasn't an opcode, there was always the alternative of spending them with signature. CTV is like that. You can always enforce a CTV-like condition by just pre-signing a transaction, but you cannot assure that that's the only way. That's the only way it could play out. And CTV lets you say, well, we're going to do the equivalent of pre-signed transaction, but we will know that there's no hypothetical other signature. And that's the same reason why you can do ARC without CTV if every single participant agrees in every single part of the rank.
Okay, so that would be the benefit or the functionality gain with adding CTV is just like you can't go back on your word of your intended eventual use of that particular UTXO?
Yeah, I mean, I think like what you said is kind of fuzzy, but I think it does encapsulate, what it really means, what CTV really means in this context. And obviously, that'll be used in certain ways by protocols. But I think you're correct in saying, yeah, it's this way of committing in advance to how a coin will be spent.
Interesting. I need to brush up on my understanding of all. Again, I always feel like there's so much going on. There's so many proposals, and I guess it's not really my realm. It's more dealing with what is currently available to me right now. So in a lot of these debates, as things are being discussed about what may or may not happen in the future, I find my bandwidth a little limited in learning about this other stuff because I'm so preoccupied with all the tools that are currently available. So,
I think that's your role, right? Like, I think that's okay. Because there are a lot of proposals that end up coming to nothing. So, I don't think you need to learn about drive chains at all. Like, I don't think it's ever going to get re-implemented. So, why do you need to worry about it? In a sense, like the service that you're giving to your audience is showing them how to do stuff that they need to do. And if there is like a functionality that you think is missing, that's when you need to speak up and say, hey, like we need something like this because it's a problem that a lot of people are having and so on. So for me, that's how it should work, where there is sort of like robust technical debate, but not everyone needs to be participating in that debate and like knowing all the details of this stuff. Honestly, there's so much in there, like with the different covenant proposals and how they're subtly different and what it enables and what the savings are here and what the trade-offs are there and stuff like that. You could easily get lost in the weeds and like ultimately so much of it might end up just like not mattering at all. So I don't think it's necessarily a great time spent.
But I got to point out though, I mean, yes, as an example, the difference between like CCV and TX hash, it's kind of academic as far as people can tell. That's kind of the weeds thing. But the difference between, say, CCV and OpCat, that is a very big question about what do we want Bitcoin to do? Because CCV, it's an opcode that commits to how you would spend a coin in the future. It's fairly restrictive. OpCat basically says, why don't we just go out Ethereum like scripting to Bitcoin? That could just do anything. And, where OpCat kind of raises a question for the wider community is what do we want Bitcoin to do? There's so many people pushing for OpCat. They don't want it to go and make your Bitcoin trading more efficient. They want it to go bring very different things to Bitcoin. Things like Ethereum style marketplaces for tokens, things like very complex financial instruments. That's not just a technical question. That's also what does the Bitcoin community want Bitcoin to be? And that is something that, while maybe some of the nuances aren't necessarily relevant to everyone, certainly the bigger question of what should Bitcoin be is relevant to everyone.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. And as soon as you start saying, this brings Ethereum style scripting to Bitcoin, I mean, there's
you kind of get that with BitVM already, but
yeah.
Not in a concrete way. I mean, I believe the easiest way to explain BitVM is it's like you have a lightning channel with someone else, but the rules of how money can move can be done with a $0 proof. That's very different than saying we can have a financial instrument with anyone that's reasonably efficient to implement that could do anything. In particular, since of course the what are they called? This big company right now really pushing off CAT for $0 proofs because they think they can implement efficient $0 proofs of anything. And then they would use that to then implement basically anything they want. That opens up a very big set of questions for Bitcoin. And a very concrete example of how this can be relevant is, of course, we've already seen fee spikes due to non-Bitcoin asset trading. Now, the way that stuff is implemented is impossible for us to stop. But with OpCats, you're potentially even widening that markets in a way where we can stop. We do not need to implement OpCat. That's a choice in a way that token trading existing at all is not a choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've in my limited understanding, I tend to lean on the side of being overly cautious with everything. And I'm one of the crazy ones where Bitcoin is I'm just living on Bitcoin now, and I do use it day to day, and I do spend it and survive on it and earn it and everything. And maybe that's a little preemptive of me, but at the same time, I'd hate to see it no longer capable of doing the things that I want to do now, and hopefully that continues to be available to me. Obviously, I know that on chain naturally will become more expensive over time, but there are a lot of tools right now available to me that makes me very optimistic for the use of Bitcoin as just day-to-day cash in the future as well, and my savings vehicle as well. So anyways, gents, so I'm conscious of time. I've got to start winding down here, but there's a thing that I like to do at the end of every episode, and I like to do just a quick round of any final thought or big takeaway that you have from the episode, but also more importantly, a recommendation. And so the recommendation can take any form. It can be as simple as just a little piece of advice that you wish you had through your Bitcoin journey early on. It could be a book or an article that you read. It could be a movie or a video or an app or a device or whatever you like, something that you think people watching will find useful. So I'll start off so that you guys have a moment to stew over that. Yeah, I mean, my big takeaway from this conversation is that Bitcoin does continue to evolve both on the base layer and in the tools in and around it and on subsequent layers. And there is always a flurry of activity despite so people that are often altcoin land, often pointing to Bitcoin and saying that it's stagnant. I think it's anything but. It just depends on how much attention you're paying to it. And again, like as I was reiterating at the end of the last topic, I'm very optimistic in and around the tools. They continue to be more and more useful to me. And as a person that is earning and living on Bitcoin and using it daily in various ways, the optionality that I have and the amount of tools that I have at my disposal continues to grow and become easier to use. And so that makes me very, very happy. I recognize that it's not easy for everybody as of yet, but I think we're headed directionally into a good place. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of things for people to check out. There is a book that I've now been reading the last little bit. I'm just seeing if I can put, here it is. Okay, I'm gonna try and zoom in and bring it up here. One sec here. So I had a guy on the show, I'm going to say a few weeks ago now, maybe a month and a half even. His name is Devin Rose, and he wrote a book called Chasing the Seeds, and it's a fiction book, and Bitcoin plays a central role to the plot, and it's a fun little I'll say dramatic thriller, and yeah, it's a good, like, just curl up and have a fun read kind of feel. So anyways, if you're looking for some Bitcoin adjacent fiction, go check out Chasing the Seeds by Devin Rose. It's fun. So I'll toss it over to Jimmy then. And again, any final thought or takeaway, as well as a recommendation if you have one.
One thought that I've been having lately is about credit cards and sort of their convenience and how people use them. I'm becoming a little more anti-credit card, as sort of like the CBDC world is sort of like encroaching on us, right? Like this is something that I think is in the works. I think a lot of governments are looking into it now. Like governments aren't very good at IT, so I don't expect it to happen quickly or anything. But it's something that they all want because it gives them a lot of control. And credit cards, I think, are going to be in some way, shape, or form sort of like a part of that. I'm getting more used to the idea that you need to be using cash more often, not giving all of these places the data about what you're doing. And, a lot of places don't even take cash anymore. But if you're the customer that has cash and you're not servicing the places that won't take cash, then they're going to lose some of your business. So in the same way that credit cards and essentially became like a must for most businesses because so many people wanted to pay with credit cards, I think we need to do the same with cash to keep cash as an essential part of the economy and sort of make the businesses that don't take cash hurt. I think ultimately it's better for them anyway because they keep more of their money and don't have to pay a 2 or 3% tax to Visa or MasterCard or American Express or Discover or whatever other thing there is. So that's sort of like my recommendation for the day. Thought-wise, I mean, I think there's a lot going on in the Bitcoin ecosystem. I mean, I think this altcoin lie that there's nothing happening is just so ridiculous because, as you said earlier, Ben, that you can't even keep up with all the different things that are happening, and most people in Bitcoin are the same way. There's just so much stuff, so many new proposals, so many interesting things that are happening. Almost like with new things coming out every day that altcoins like can't even come close to, right? It's all, most of the altcoin press releases are sort of like vaporware. Hey, we're gonna do this and we're gonna do this. Whereas like the Bitcoin stuff, there's like people actually working on the software, and there's like proof of concepts and all this other stuff that's actually actively working. And that to me is the proof is in the pudding, right? Like it's the people that are creating stuff, whereas it's proof of press release for most of these altcoins.
Fair enough. To your CBDC point, one extra little thing people can check out if you're curious about the current state of development of CBDCs in your country. The Human Rights Foundation put together cbdctracker.org, and you can actually search your country and find in what stages CBDCs are currently at. And if you hover over your country, you can also see the various projects, like proof of concept, like what they are and what's being done. So you can see, like, obviously there's the e-Naira here, which is launched, and then you click and learn, but you can see kind of how close you are to that dystopian hellscape, if you please. So cbdctracker.org is a good one to check out. But Peter, I'll toss it to you again for any final thoughts and a recommendation if you got one.
Well, I mean, first of all, I do need to go second the whole cash thing. And it just maddens me every time I see so-called Bitcoiners paying with credit cards. Like it or not, credit cards are the central bank digital currency. They may not be quite what, CDBC is usually thought of, but from the point of view of the lack of privacy and the central control, we're already there. And, if you're not using cash as much as you possibly can, you're a part of getting rid of this ability to go and transact without third parties. It's like it or not. I mean, Bitcoin is just not that important compared to cash. And also, Bitcoin cannot exist without either overwhelming adoption or cash. And in any circumstance where you don't have cash, you live in a world where your ability to use Bitcoin is really realistically controlled by governments, because they can always go cut off the on-ramps to the digital currency system. And like it again, credit cards and debit cards, they are central bank digital currency equivalent. They happen to be run by third parties, but it's essentially the same thing. So yeah, you use cash. I mean, I happen to be in Ukraine right now, and it's really refreshing to see the fact that I can pay for like a taxi ride with cash, or even a Bolt ride with cash. I mean, Uber sent me a notification the other day, reminding me, oh yeah, here you can go pay with cash, and of course I pay with cash every single time I can. Like it's just so essential to go and maintain this, because once you lose this, cutting off Bitcoin is just so easy.
Yeah.
If you can't buy or sell Bitcoin, you're screwed.
Yeah.
By the way, in a hyperinflationary scenario, no credit cards work because nobody is waiting 45 days to get paid.
I mean, that's
what happens.
I know. But the problem with that, though, is like that's the thing that can be fixed and can be mandated. I mean, hyperinflation isn't guaranteed to make credit cards go away. There's this whole 45 days thing that needs to be done.
But that's
not a mandatory feature.
No, but you go to places with hyperinflation, you can't pay with credit card. That's just a fact.
Look. I get that, but that is an artifact of how credit cards happen to be influenced in those places. If the U.S. had hyperinflation, with their control of the credit card system, they would just go say, yeah, you might go net in 40 days in theory, but we're going to go treat it like it doesn't and just force issue. You cannot rely on that kind of shit. Like it or not, having
I think merchants would revolt in that sort of scenario.
It doesn't matter. They can go and change the netting. They don't need it to be 45 days. In fact, it could even be more of a disaster for merchants, because they can go and do all kinds of crazy stuff where if there's a chargeback, we'll go apply the inflation rate to the chargeback. Like that is not a good argument. It really isn't. The fact of the matter is that hyperinflation, credit cards enable central bank digital currency like aspects, and they can go and do all kinds of very coercive things. There is no alternative to cash.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's what ends up being the thing that people trust the most, because they don't trust credit cards. That's all. And I think you're making the same.
I'm just saying, like, your argument is for a very specific way of credit cards being implemented. Do not assume that'll stay that way. That's just because the countries that have hyperinflation so far are shitholes that do not have the control over debits and credit systems that something like the U.S. does. The U.S. gets into that state, guarantee you they'll go and change the way the netting works to go and extract every last bit of value out of you.
I mean, I haven't seen it, and I haven't seen the will to change it that way. And I'll believe it once that happens.
Never seen hyperinflation in a big Western country. Once we do,
Canada might be the first.
Yeah.
Once Canada happens, we'll see.
It might be. But all right, so let me go give my recommendation. And this is something I've run into repeatedly, which is do the fucking numbers. And this is for all the tech people out there. And over again, I see proposals and stuff where people just haven't sat down and actually done the numbers. And I ran into this in my L2 paper, because I seem to be the first person to notice, certain things, but off pat, just how efficient it was and so on. And I'm not going to bore you with the details, but the important thing to take away from this is I did the analysis carefully, sat down with a sheet of paper and worked out, how efficient certain things would be, what they would cost. I ran the numbers. And it's just something I think in the tech community we're actually kind of bad at. There's not that many people who make proposals that are filled with math equations. It doesn't have to be complex math equations, but if you don't have some math equations in there for the sort of things that work on money, you're probably doing something wrong.
Fair enough. Run the numbers. All right. And use cash. I like it.
Yep.
Well, gentlemen, I'm going to round it out there. In the cash vein, I will say one final thing. Here in Calgary, we're running our SAT market a couple times a year where we get everybody together. All the Bitcoin accepting merchants also accept cash, and we're doing that as a mechanism to, I guess, help orange pill, independent, and we'll just say sovereignty-minded individuals, which there's more of, I think, here in Alberta than some other places in Canada. But yeah, we're working on that, and yeah. So if anybody ever gets the chance to come up to a SAT market, come partake, spend some sats or spend some cash, or both, or exchange some cash for sats for vice versa. But with that, we're going to round out. Gents, thank you so much for being here. Everybody watching, make sure you hit up their links down below so you can give them a follow and see what they're up to. Peter, I did drop the link to your paper in the chat during the show as well. So hopefully people can click on and check that out. And with that, guys, thank you once more. Thanks for getting bullish with me on a Friday, and you're both welcome back anytime.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks, guys. Cheers. And everybody watching, thank you for being here as well. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, make sure you follow those gentlemen. Their links are down below. If you can, please also do like, sub, share. All those things, they help a ton getting this content in front of more eyeballs. You can also hit up the previously mentioned sponsors in the show notes down below. And then finally, if you have been floating around the channel and you've been checking out the tutorials, but you've hit a snag and you find you need some one-on-one help, then please do reach out to my team over at bitcoinmentor.io. We've aggregated an incredible group of Bitcoin educators that can lead you through anything, whether it be hot wallets, hardware, multisig, Lightning, running a node, even some fun home mining stuff, we'll say as a hobbyist, but plenty of different stuff you can learn about. Just reach over at bitcoinmentor.io. And with that, I'm out. Have yourselves a wonderful day or evening, wherever it may be. We'll see you guys next time for your daily session.
HODL the Bitcoin.